Byte Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech Byte Tips video. In today's video, I'm gonna do a little bit of a theory video because this is gonna explain a little bit how a future application that I'm gonna be showing in the channel works, and it gives you the understanding of how the technology has evolved to the point that we are now. You might be familiar with this logo. This is the logo of the BitTorrent project or the BitTorrent protocol. And if you're familiar with the applications that we have been setting up in the NAS series here with the R's, you'll notice that one of those applications is the BitTorrent client. And you know that it's amazing because it allows you to get files and share stuff. Now we're going to cover how. How do we get to do that and why it's a powerful protocol that was invented and the benefits that it has. So first of all, let me go into the Wikipedia page of the BitTorrent for a second. And I want to show you a quick animation that they have here of how the BitTorrent protocol works. You might be already familiar with how the BitTorrent protocol works. Basically, it tells you that one person starts a torrent and that person has the full file that they want to share. And then once they connect to the BitTorrent network, any other people that are interested in that file then retrieve that file. But all of this is done not from a single server, but it's done peer-to-peer. So this person that has the complete file shares that part of that file with somebody else. And then once that person gets that part of the file, they start also sharing that with the rest of the network. And in this animation, you can see that in action. So this is what happens when you share using the BitTorrent network. So you have the full file here, the rest don't have it. You start sharing, they start populating parts of the file, and then they start sharing it with other people, as you can see. And the network starts growing and the file becomes more available in the network, and it is easier to have access to that file. So that's basically how the BitTorrent protocol works. It's decentralized, meaning that the file is not in one server, it's in a bunch of different computers of people that are participating on that network. And all those peoples are actively sharing that file, so sending it out to other people, and whenever they don't have that file, they receive these segments from other people in the network that do. So that's how the BitTorrent protocol works. But how do you even get to this point? How your computer is able to join into this network and then start receiving and sharing the files. So that's the main thing that I want to cover here, because that's going to be related to an application that I'm going to be deploying later in another video. And we're going to be talking about how this has evolved. If you're familiar with like the early 2000s and 2010s, at the time you would find websites that served as trackers for the torrent files. So for example, if you wanted to share a video, let's say the graduation video of your college or something like that, right? Your computer would have to store that file, and then you had to create a torrent file that defined what that file was like and how to access it, right? And then you had to upload that file to a website that would work as a tracker. This website would know what the contents of that file are, and it would also track, hence the name tracker, who has the file, and then it would create a table mapping the people in the network to the files. So whenever you loaded that torrent, right, let's say you're a new person that wanted to download that file, then your torrent client would communicate with that tracker server, and then the tracker server would give you the table or the list of people that have that file, and then you would reach out directly into all those clients requesting the file that you need. And as the network grows, then you will be also notified of people that want that file, and then you can share the parts of the file that you have. I mean, if you have the whole file, then you would share the whole file to the network. But it originally was created with the idea of having decentralization, with making the accessibility of the files robust, making sure that there was no bottleneck, there was no dependency on one company, one server, one person owning that file and being the only place where you can get it from. And originally the concept was a great idea, especially for universities when they needed to share, a lot of files of things that they were researching. But as usual, it came to a point where people saw a way to make money out of this, and then private trackers started appearing. And what happened there? In a private tracker, you had to be a member of a community. And this is an example of a list of private trackers, right? So what happens with private trackers? Well, the thing with private trackers is that people started basically using this to make money mostly. So when somebody uploaded a torrent file to a private tracker, then that basically got isolated from the rest of the network, where you could only download that torrent if you were part of that community. Why? Because the tracker implemented other restrictions there too. For example, you needed to have an account in that tracker. That was one of the things. If you did not have an account in that tracker, you were not a member of that tracker, you would not get access to the file. You would not be able to download anything. You would be sort of blacklisted. And this had a sense, sort of, because there was also a lot of censorship going on, and there was companies that were joining the network to figure out who was sharing things and then taking legal action against people. So that was one of the positives of that. But at the same time, like I said, then became more of a business where they started implementing things like a limit. So you had a certain amount of free traffic that you could extract from the network, and you would have a ratio. So if you download too much and you don't give back to the network, then your ratio would fall down. And once you got to a point where your ratio was too low, then it would just basically ban you. You were not allowed to extract anything else out of the network until you shared something to the network and bring your ratio up. So originally that was a good idea. It made sure that the torrents stayed alive because people were constantly sharing those files. But then, like I said, people started making private trackers just to make money out of it. So what they would do is, okay, if you want to download and not have to contribute to the network, then you have to pay us money. And then they started implementing those kind of things like, okay, if you want 10 gigabytes, for example, of free leeching, it's what they used to call it, then you need to pay a certain amount of money. And then this kind of messed the way that the system was working, because then it became a for-profit thing rather than just making sure that the accessibility of files was robust. So when this started happening, you remember that then we started seeing a shift from torrents into magnet links. And this is like the evolution of the peer-to-peer network, where they came up with what is called a distributed hash table. So that table of peers that used to be in one server now is distributed across the network of BitTorrent. So you don't rely on one specific website or tracker to get access to your torrents. So if we go into this document here, what is the DHT and how does it work? Basically tells us that it's a way to decentralize the information about the torrents. So it eliminates the need for centralized servers, also known as trackers. And it allows you to discover torrents and peers on the network by yourself. So you don't rely on a third party to be able to find things in the network. So basically at this point means that you just need a magnet link, and then once your torrent client has that magnet link, it's able to talk to the different nodes in the BitTorrent network, and those nodes are other people that are sharing files, and then ask basically all of those different nodes, hey, I have this magnet, it has this specific hash, do you know who has this file? And then the other active clients in the network would share that distributed hash table with you. And then your computer would be aware, okay, for this specific torrent with this magnet link, now I know that I can get it from X, Y, and Z people in the network. And again, you get added into that distributed hash table as a person that is participating in the sharing of that torrent. So then your information gets added there, and then other people can access you also to receive the file or the information about the torrent. So if you remember when we set up the BitTorrent client, whenever we added a magnet link, the first thing that it would say is downloading metadata. That's because we didn't have a torrent file. Usually that's within the torrent file. But since we've evolved into the DHT now, most things are shared through the hash table. So when it's downloading metadata, it's basically asking other nodes in the network, okay, I have this magnet link, how can I download it? Who has this, right? And here we have the key concepts of this, the hash, which is a unique identifier for each torrent file. So when you look at the magnet link, it'll have a hash. That's what this is talking about. And then there's a node ID, which is a unique identifier for each client in the network. So like when you join the network, your client is assigned a unique ID. And that's how people can know who you are and how to get the files from you. The hash table is, like I was describing, a table of hashes. So it has the hash of the torrents, right? And then it has a list of people that are sharing that torrent. So that's why it's a table. It's a matching of the hash of the torrent with a list of people that have it or are participating in that. And then the closeness is a mathematical calculation that lets you know which clients are closer to you, because it improves the traffic if you're communicating with people that are closer to you. So it doesn't necessarily has to be like geographically. It's just based on the node ID. So your ID is closer to them. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're talking to people that are in your country, right? It's just based on the hash, the identifier that you were given when you joined the network. So basically, the DHT network allows us to be independent of any third party that might be restricting access to the torrents to make a profit. And it allows us to contact different machines that allows us to join a network and identify who else is in there. To identify people in the network, the first client or node that you talk to is what is called a bootstrapping node. So that is like a router node in the network. So that's the first one that you're going to talk to. And they usually have information about the network, how it looks like, and other clients that are connected. So for example, if you're connecting to router.utorrent.com, it knows about that specific infrastructure of that network in that domain. So you have a bunch of different bootstrap nodes that you first connect to. They give you basically the metadata, and then you start identifying other clients or people in the network. Now here's basically describing what we were talking about when it comes to the closeness of the clients. So based on the ID, like I said, so you're close if your ID is pretty similar to another ID in the network, and you keep expanding from there. So you first reach to those close IDs that are similar to yours, and then they have another list of nodes that are closer to their ID, and then they share that with you, and your network keeps on expanding. So that's how you basically join and expand your network. Now another thing is, each client has their own port where they're listening for connections, because remember, that's how you set it up when you configure BitTorrent. So it's not going to be the same port for people. So that list in the distributed hash table that has your IP also has which port you specified your client to be communicating through. So that's why it is powerful, and it is able to properly connect between different clients. Now here we have a description of how you discover the peers for the torrents. And basically it says that, whenever you start a magnet, you have to place a request to the router nodes, and in that request you use the information in the magnet link, and for that you're going to submit the request to the network where you're looking for the hash of that magnet in the table. So when a node receives your request, if they don't know it, like if they don't have it in their table, they'll just pass it along the network to another node in the network until you find a node that has that key in their table. And then that node is going to send that reply back through the network to you, and then you will get that information that you need. That'll give you the list of the peers that are sharing that file. So that's why sometimes it's a little slow. Well, if you compare it to using it, it's definitely slower, because it's a slow process where you have to discover the clients that are sharing the file that you care about, and that has to propagate through the network. And once you get that list of clients, then your client is going to try to connect directly to each peer to get a segment of that file that you don't have. So the good thing about this is that you don't need to have the full file to share information in the network. If you have at least a little bit of the file, you can share that little bit of the file, and that counts as a credit for you too in the network. The performance of the DHT is something that we have to take into consideration. One of the first things that you need to know is that you don't have to be refreshing tracker connections because it just does it automatically. It makes sure that you are up to date on the hash for that torrent that you're trying to share, and it does it seamlessly in the background. Another thing is that it could get slow if there is a problem with availability of that information. So that's why you might see that your torrents get stuck into downloading metadata status for a while. It's because it's not finding what you need, and that'll obviously make it work slow. And also it depends on how many peers you have. Like, you might have already received the hash table, but maybe for that specific torrent you only have, one or two people that are sharing that file, and they have very restrictive amount of bandwidth that they're sharing. So that's going to mean that you only have a certain amount of bandwidth that you can pull out of the network, and then your torrent could be slow. So that's why it's important for people to seed the torrents when they want to share something, so that more people are accessible in the network, and then you have a higher pool of bandwidth where you can pull that information from. Another thing is, when you're connecting to the network, you have to configure your client to be able to properly use the DHT nodes and network. And that is something that we set up in BitTorrent, where we said enable the DHT network to find more peers. If you have this enabled, then you take advantage of the DHT protocol to discover people that are sharing the files. There's some other things that they mention here, like enabling port forwarding. Obviously, if you need to receive the traffic, you want to make sure that that port is accessible and that your firewall is not blocking it. So those are basic points here. But then it says you also have to consider that your internet service provider might interfere with your torrent traffic. If you're torrenting and you're not using, for example, a VPN, then your internet service provider can see what your traffic is. They can see that you're sharing torrents, and they might decide to even block your traffic or throttle your traffic. Blocking is they don't allow you to use that at all, and throttle is that they might say, okay, you're only going to download 1 kilobyte per second in this type of traffic. So that's why a lot of people rely on a VPN to use torrenting, because then you encapsulate your torrent traffic into a secure encrypted tunnel that your ISP cannot sniff. They cannot know what you're doing there, and that's how they get over the blocking by the ISPs. So this is a nice article. I thought it would be good to cover this because it gives us an idea of how the DHT network works, and that's how we are able to then get to this point where we retrieve sections of the file, and then we're able to transfer those to other people that are needing that in the network. And as you can see from this diagram, it started with only 1 or 2 people having the full file, and then it grew into a way where there's a lot of healthy communication between different nodes, and everybody slowly populates the different sections of the files that they want through the other peers in the network. That's the advantage of the BitTorrent network and the advantage of the distributed hash table protocol within the BitTorrent network. It gets better as you have more people in there, which is the difference with Usenet. I'm going to do another video covering Usenet, but Usenet basically is not a distributed network, it's a centralized server where you download things. So that's the main difference between BitTorrent and the DHT network versus the Usenet. I hope you like this video. I hope you find it informative. I'm trying to give you more technical knowledge into how things work, not just give you, how to set up applications and things like that, because I think it's beneficial. If you know how things work, you're able to troubleshoot things better, and you know how to make things work better for you, and how you can be a contributor to the network and, make this peer-to-peer essence live and be useful for other people. As I said, this was originally used by universities and researchers, so this is not a malign kind of technology. This originated out of a good intention to share information amongst people and bypass censorship and have high availability and resiliency. So I hope you find it useful. This is going to be it for this one. On the next video, I'm going to set up an application that takes advantage of this so that you don't rely on indexers that might be unreliable, that might be taken down, or you might be throttled, or you might need to, have a certain amount of ratio or things like that. So that's going to be the next one, leveraging this to create your own indexer basically for torrents. So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. Leaving comments in the comment section below, because I make those videos based on things that you're interested in and you want to learn and you have issues with. I try to help you out there too if I can. And also remember, I'm not monetizing the channel. You should have not received a video on my video because I'm not monetizing on purpose. That also means that since I'm not putting ads on my videos, I'm not making money out of YouTube. So if you want to support me to continue creating good quality content for you, there's a link in the description below for PayPal where you can contribute. There's also a Bitcoin address where you can contribute also. And I really appreciate it because it's going to help me focus on the channel, hopefully get to a point where we can, grow the channel enough to get sponsorships and get access to, other technologies and tools that you might be interested in. And it's going to be better for all of us. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care.